All right, welcome everybody. Super excited to be going through this amazing topic today, mastering growth cycles, how to supercharge your practice with expert cash flow management. And super excited to be hosting this today with my partner, founder of Lucro, Adam Rundle. A little bit about Adam, if you haven't worked with him directly, yes, I call him a financial wizard from South Africa. Because that's exactly what he is. He's helped navigate massive companies. He was the original CFO for Jasper AI, which is now a billion-dollar company. Let me say that again, a billion-dollar company. He was their first CFO. And then he's built an entire business helping scale businesses from a financial aspect. People would pay him $25,000 a month for fractional CFO consulting. And so we have the privilege of working with him at Lucro and his expertise into helping scale clinics from a financial basis. Understanding cash flow management is a huge aspect of scaling your clinic at the best ways possible, minimizing risk and maximizing reward. You know, one of my favorite sayings has always been revenue is vanity, profit is sanity. But one of the latest additions I've learned about is cash flow is king. And so that's what Adam's going to be talking about today, and how you can utilize cash flow more effectively in your business to supercharge the growth of your clinic. So without further ado, Adam, we're really excited to hear what you have to say today.
Cool. Thanks, Dr. Josiah. I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. It's good to be here and good to be sharing this with you. So yeah, we're going to talk about cash flow, and we're going to talk about probably cash flow is a subsection of a bigger topic called strategic planning. So how do we plan for growth? We want to now grow and scale our practices. How do we actually go about building a strategic plan so that we can achieve that outcome? And then we'll cover that, as well as the power of cash flow. How does cash flow enable that, and how does cash flow interact with you growing and scaling your practice? And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about resource mastery. So if we're going to deploy resources, which we have to do in order to grow and scale our practices, how do we do that? How do we think about doing that? And what are the most effective ways of doing that? So I'm going to start off with showing you a graphical representation, which is by far the best way to do it, of what does a growth cycle look like. Now, have I done this right or wrong? Probably wrong, because I did it about 100 times. There it is. Okay, so you can see my screen, and we have this first part of the strategic growth plan is a graphical representation of what growth is going to look like in your business. And so on the bottom axis, we have income. So we're just tracking monthly income as we go, and we're going to create a plan. We're going to say, well, we want to grow, and we can use an example here. We want to grow to $50,000 a month in our practice. Okay, so there we've got this little target that says $50,000 a month. On the y-axis, we've got pre-tax profit, so it's how profitable we're going to be. The first mistake everyone makes in strategic planning is defining their goal by one thing only, and that's income. So they say, I want to grow to $50,000 a month. Now that's great. You want to grow to $50,000 a month. My question to you will be then, well, how profitable do you want to be at $50,000 a month? Because just getting to $50,000 a month in revenue is not that hard. I could probably make $50,000 on this call right now in about 5 seconds. I'll offer anyone $50,000, and in 10 minutes, I'll give you $65,000 back. I'm pretty sure someone's going to probably take me up on the deal. Okay? Why? Because I made 50,000, but it cost me 65, which is a silly idea. But the idea of just income is only one part of any goal that we're actually trying to set. The other needs to be, well, if we're going to get there, how profitable are we going to be when we get there? And what we believe in at Lucro is utilizing the perfect P&L framework in order to understand, well, what should my profit margin be at that different revenue line? And obviously it can change. You know, it does change. I'm using a 30% example here. The perfect P&L changes from different revenue bands to how you're generating your revenue. We've done an entire masterclass on the perfect P&L that'll be put into the comments that you can watch that. I'm not going to dive into that. It's an absolute waste of time right now in terms of this topic. But we want to identify what is the profit margin we want to experience at that revenue band. That is actually the target. This is not a target. This is just some number pie in the sky out there. This is a target. We want to get to $50,000 a month in revenue, and we want to be X profitable in this case. We want to be 30% profitability. We want to make $15,000 of profit by doing so. We then make our second big mistake is we assume, so our first mistake was we defined it poorly. We just said a revenue number. Our second mistake is we assume that growth is going to be linear. So now we assume that I'm going to go from wherever I was, in this case, 0 to 50,000 in a nice, very beautifully drawn with a ruler, straight line. There's going to be no kinks or curves. It's just going to be hunky-dory. I'm going to snap my fingers, and every day I'm just going to make more money and more profit. When in reality, a growth curve, which is essentially what this is, probably represents something like this. Now, obviously, it can be anything because it can grow anyway. Sometimes it goes to negative profitability, especially if you're in certain industries where you have to have huge capital outlay. But usually there's a much slower profitability level as we're growing. So we're expending a lot of energy and we're trying to scale up to that $50,000 number. We're not making a lot of profit, but eventually we see this upkick, like the hockey stick effect, where we start to get closer and closer to our ideal metric, which is the $50,000 a month in revenue and the profit margin we want. And so there's a great analogy here. You're driving a car 30 miles per hour down the road, nice flat road, there's no incline or decline, and you want to go faster. So what do you do if you want to go faster? You put your foot on the gas. When you put your foot on the gas, your revs increase, you increase the amount of energy you're expending, but you start to increase your speed. And you're getting faster and faster. Eventually you change gears. Maybe you're in third gear, you change to fourth gear, it gets a little bit easier, but your revs are still high. Then you eventually change to fifth gear. And then all of a sudden, everything comes down back to normal. You feel pretty good. Your car's not shaking anymore. There's not a big loud noise, and you're driving 60 miles per hour down the road. That is the exact example of this. You started at 30. In order to get to 60, we had to expend a lot of energy. We had to get our car going, get those revs going. We're consuming a lot of fuel. We're doing all of that in order to get to the speed level when we change gear, we can be at normal. If we didn't put our foot on the gas, we wouldn't go anywhere. If we change gear to fifth gear first and then put our foot on the gas, we're just going to chug, 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 and we're going to stop. So we have to get the sequence right. So like in your business, you're going to expend a whole bunch of energy. You're going to start to see the outcome, and then we can optimize everything and get it well aligned. So that is what you're going to see pretty typically, very similar to a car, if you want to grow from A to B. Then we've now learned our first lesson is we're now going to set our second goal. In this case, we're going to go to 100. Okay, great. We're going to set our new target. Okay, great. We've now learned the lesson. We don't just set pie in the sky targets. We set targets that are both revenue and profitability driven. We use the perfect P&L framework. Again, I'm just using 30% for now, just to keep it simple. So there's our new goal. It's all set. And hopefully we don't make the same mistake again and assume that this time it's going to be linear. We understand that we're going to have this curve. Okay, so we're going to have this wavy curve. And ultimately, this is what growth is going to look like in your business. There's just wavy effect of low profit margins, high expenditure, like high pressure on your business. Eventually it gets pretty good. And then it goes and goes and goes and goes as we keep going along. Another great analogy is the marathon versus the sprint. Running a business is a marathon. We want to last for a long time. We can't just go sprinting every single moment of every single day of our lives running our businesses. So we're running this massively lifelong marathon. But when we want to grow, we want to sprint. We want to go as fast as we can for that period of time to climb the hill that we need to climb. And so this little phase in the middle here, this growth phase, is this area we're trying to manage. So if we want to plan for growth, we've got to manage this phase. That's going to say, hey, we're now sprinting. We're now putting our foot on the gas, trying to go from 30 to 60. What is going to happen in this period of time that we need to be consciously aware of and plan for so that we can navigate it correctly so we can actually get to point B. But when we fail to navigate that, and I don't have a slide for this, and now as I'm saying it, I wish I did. And I used to have a slide that goes, this thing just goes all the way back down to 0 and you just fall off the cliff. Why? Because if we don't effectively plan for this growth phase, we're not going to get there, and we're going to then go back down to lower revenue levels, probably lower profitability. We're going to have expended a lot of energy and actually got absolutely nowhere. We're going to chase our tail for no reason.
Adam, let me jump in here and give it kind of a real world application. You know, I had a fantastic call with a doctor, one of our Luco clients in Ohio yesterday, and this is the exact scenario that he was in. If you want to pull that graph up, the one right before that, with the growth, actually pull up that growth phase one again. He was generating right now about $50,000 a month in revenue. But I did a capacity evaluation, in which we do have a whole capacity calculator webinar. We'll get that posted in the chat as well. If you haven't watched that one, you need to understand your capacity. And so what was happening is I talked about, hey, tell me about your team. How many team members do you have? How many new patients can you see? You know, and he did the math, and we did the math together. And based on his current team that he had at a $50,000 a month revenue, he calculated that he had enough new patient slots to see 150 new patients a month. All right. Then I said, well, what are you doing? He pulled up his data, looked at his numbers, and he was averaging 50 new patients a month for this year so far. So he's operating, you know, at only a 33% capacity of potential new patients, but he has the expenses of 150 new patient business, right? So he has the revenue of a 50 patient business, but he has the expenses of 150 new patient business. So again, action step. If you do not know how many new patients you can see on a weekly basis, you need to have that number. You need to know that number. You need to track the number every single week. That is one of our main stats that we bring to our leadership meeting every single week, is percentage of schedule filled. We track percentage of day one schedule filled, percentage of day two schedule filled, and percentage of adjustment schedule filled. You need to know those numbers, because you need to know if you're operating at capacity, 50% capacity, 30%, 75% capacity. You have to know that, because that's going to plan and help you dictate what you need to focus on. Where is your bottleneck? In this exact example, this guy had a fantastic team. He thought he had a great team, but he thought, I'm way overpaying. Maybe I need to get rid of somebody. No, he wants to grow. He wants to get to the next level. He needs to leverage his team better by utilizing his full new patient capacity and getting up to that 150 new patients, because he has the team to support it. And so we did the math. You know, he could go from 50 to $150,000 a month with essentially no increase in expenses, right? Let's just say it was a 20%, you know, increase, you know, in expenses, or, you know, from that $100,000, let's say $20,000 more dollars he would have to invest into expenses. So that would add an additional $80,000 in profit per month for this doctor, another $1 million in pure profit that he already had the capacity. He already had the team. He already had the space. He already had the availability to generate another $1 million in profits. And he didn't understand that. And that was just a very basic framework of understanding exactly what Adam is talking about. And I love the car analogy, Adam, because it's so fantastic. When I was growing up, my grandparents, amazing people, very, very frugal. They read some article somewhere that 62 miles per hour was optimal gas mileage. All right. And so their goal would be to get to 62 miles per hour, set it on cruise control. And, you know, if anyone's going faster, they say faster than them, they say they'd pass them at the gas station. All right. Because they got ideal miles per gallon at 62 miles per hour. All right. I used to, you know, when I was younger, you know, I had very little money. I was always trying to find the cheapest, you know, car. And a lot of times on Craigslist, what do they say? 150,000 miles, mostly highway miles, right? Because they're trying to make you think that the car is in better shape than it is, even though it's 150,000 miles. Most of them are highway mileage because you're just cruising on the highway. It's way less wear and tear, right? So think of that same concept for your practice. Yes, you might have to put a lot of energy. Yes, your margins might be lower to get to cruising altitude, to get to a higher income and a higher profitability business. You're going to have to put your foot on the gas, right? You're going to have to pass a few people, right? You're going to have to do a little bit of difficult things, right? And it might be a little hard to first merge onto the highway when you've never merged on the highway in driver's ed before. But once you get on the highway, you're cruising, you're set it in cruise control. Maybe you have adaptive cruise control. Maybe you have super cruise, you know, in your car. Maybe you have automated driving, right? All of that is easier on the highway when you're going faster, when you're making more money, when you're being more profitable. And so doctors are like, how do you do it? How do you, how is your business going to generate $6.5 million a year? It's easier to generate $6 million a year than it used to be my first year making $1 million a year. That was a much more difficult day-to-day grind making $1 million than it is now making over $6 million. And so this is the understanding of framework of financial scaling that you need to have. There's going to be these dips in profitability, as you can see on this graph. But as you work through each of these growth phases and get to these peaks, then you can make the decision. Maybe you're cool. Maybe you want to get to $2 million or $3 million or whatever you feel like is your cruise control. And you're at your level of freedom, you're at your level of profit, and then you can stay there. Or maybe you always want to reach the next level. That's totally up to you. But that's something I would say is, hey, where do you want to get to? Where's the lifestyle that you want to be? And then how can you put your business in cruise control, right? And do all the things, have all the freedom you want? Because to me, that's the main thing. Any entrepreneur I've ever talked to, I ever work with, why do they become an entrepreneur is because of freedom. And freedom might look different for different individuals, but at its core, I truly believe freedom is the main reason anyone becomes an entrepreneur. And so how do you get your business into cruise control? And so, all right, Adam, you keep going because this is so fantastic. This is the nuts and bolts. What I'm talking about is like the cool, shiny objects, vision, how do you make it happen? Let's get to that reality. But you got to get your hands dirty. You got to do the work. You got to understand the framework, because when you get into these areas where you have low profitability and you're thinking, holy cow, I'm making more money, but I'm not making more profit. And then maybe you give up or you go backwards. We need to be able to understand these plateaus and these changes in business dynamics as you grow so that you can push through those bottlenecks and get to the cruising altitude on the other side.
Perfect. So I want to kind of do a midpoint summary, not midpoint, little summary here. So if we're thinking about strategic growth, okay, go back up. So we're thinking about strategic growth. We're trying to plan for strategic growth. There are really three big things we need to be thinking about, and then we'll build on them as we go. The first one is the perfect P&L. This is why we obsess so much about the perfect P&L. It is why we obsess so much about providing you with monthly reports that are perfect P&L breakdowns, that are telling you where are you in relation to where you should be with your marketing costs, with your team costs, with your overhead costs. Why do we keep emphasizing that, and why do we keep going back to that? Is because no matter what we want to do, even if we want to cruise, we need to know what cruising is. But if we want to grow, we need to know what growing is. And we know all of that by the perfect P&L. The perfect P&L gives us that entire framework. It tells us, are you at the level you need to be at right now? 50,000, 30% profit margin. Not are you there, but are you there healthily? Yes, you can be there. Anyone I've got on a call with who's got good profit margins, there's often things that are misaligned still. We're spending maybe still too much in marketing and too little here, or too much there or too much there. Why does that become important? Because we're not just thinking about being good at 50,000. We want to be good at 100. We want to be good at 500. We want to be good at 1 million. And these are the building blocks. So if you've got a misalignment at 50,000, even if you high profit margin, how are you going to create realignment at 100 or 150,000? It starts at the bottom. So we go back to the perfect P&L. We hammer it home time and time again because it helps you maximize profitability, plan for growth, forecast how to grow. It does all those things for you. Okay, so we hammer home the perfect P&L. And I couldn't talk about it enough, because without it, I will show you the problems that you could experience. The second thing then is understanding that, yes, this thing exists. This is normal. There are going to be phases where you look at a report and it's not what you want it to be. It's going to have a lower profit margin. It's going to have a highest allocation to marketing. It's going to have a higher allocation to team. And you may feel discouraged and annoyed and whatever it may be. But if you understood that we're in the middle of a growth cycle, we've identified that, we've understood where we are, where we're trying to go to, you can navigate that much better. You can understand, hey, that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing that my marketing is high. I cannot tell how many people have a comment, this metric is high, but needed in order to hit the revenue goals that we want to hit. So it's normal. So we've got to get comfortable with growth phases. We've got to be comfortable being in that pressure pot, knowing that we know where we're trying to get to. Then the third thing is about projecting the needs we have. So this is where it gets really hard. Okay. And so this is all about talking about, well, what do we actually need to grow? Can we identify the exact things that we need in order to go from 50 to 100, from A to B, doesn't matter what they are, can we truly identify what the things are that we need? There are probably only 4 that you ever really need. And there are some iteration of the 4. There's maybe a hybrid of one plus the other, but you can boil it down to one of these 4 things 95% of the time. So what are they? The first one is marketing investment. We need to spend more resources, whether that's financial or time, energy, and effort, into marketing in order to increase new patient inflow. Why? Because we are running a business. How do you go faster in your business? Or you got to get more people to pay you more money, or the same amount of people to pay you more money, and you got to run your expenses correctly. That's how you get to higher revenue, higher profit margin. So the first is investing into marketing. The second can be things like care protocols, or thinking about how can you increase the lifetime value of a patient. Can you build more wellness plans? Can you maybe offer niche service, like niche care plans to your current patient demographic or group? What can you do to increase the lifetime value of any particular patient you have? Why? What does that do? That again increases your top line revenue, hopefully at an efficient rate, so you're maximizing profitability. The third would be your team. What do I need to do, or do I need to invest in my team in order to increase capacity? Do I need another front desk person? Do I need another associate? Do I need another tech? Maybe I need another, partner to be a DC, to be a chiropractor with me, whatever that may be. What do I need to do with my team in order to maximize that capacity so that I can hit those different revenue bands? And then the last one.
Let's remember too, so many of these things don't cost any additional money. That's one of the main things that I talk about all the time, is whether you make $50,000 a month or $150,000 a month, most likely your team didn't change, your space didn't change, your rent didn't change, your electric bill didn't change, your internet bill didn't change, your debt didn't change, the cost of your meals didn't change, like most things are not going to change, so increasing lifetime value, one of the things that Adam talked about, is a massive opportunity. That's one thing that we tracked in our business in Q1 of this year. Our average initial care plan was $5,700. And so how do we improve that? Well, we just ended Q2 a few months ago. Our average initial care plan that someone signed up for was $7,200. And so we didn't change marketing. We didn't change staff. We didn't change, essentially anything except doing a better job of communicating on the front end what all protocols in our office, or do people need more care to get better results faster, right? And so we increased $1,500 per new patient sign up, right? If we have 60 new patient signups a month, we just increased $90,000 a month in pure profit, right? We just added another $1 million to my business by that focus this last quarter of increasing the initial care plan sign up from 5,700 to 7,200. And so when you're able to do this, that's where expenses can stay the same, revenue can keep scaling, and obviously that difference is your profit margin, and your profitability, going through the roof. So understanding these dynamics, is massive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say anymore because it's huge. That's and you saw that in your last, on the last webinar we did, we showcased how successful you've been at doing that. I would say the last of the 4 is maybe your location. So there could be now a shift in your location. Now it could be location or capital cost. You can kind of lump those two together. Hey, I need to go get a decompression table, or I would like to get a software machine, or you would like to do some capital investment that is going to allow you to offer more treatment plans or treatment protocols to your patients, which is then going to drive, revenue. Okay. Or your location is not big enough. You need to move. So some kind of capital expenditure. So those 4.
Yeah, and I would add to that too, Adam, efficiency of your location. We did $5.5 million in 1,800 square feet. I was just had a call last week with a doctor, has 3,000 square feet, doing $1 million, right? So we're half the size doing 5 times the revenue. That means we're 10 times more efficient, right? Than they were. I've talked to doctors on the call that said, my schedule is completely full. I have a waiting list practice, and they are seeing 50 people a week. because they're doing the ultrasound, they're doing the stim, they're doing all these different things in their office that were taking up all their time. They were the cleaner, they were the janitor, they were the day one, they were the day two, they were doing everything. They had no staff members, right? So how do you increase your capacity? Is a big part of that is increasing the efficiency, right? And from a team member's perspective, maybe you need more team members, but I guess 99% of you need better team members that are higher quality, that can fulfill at a higher level, that can perform at a better level. So you need to invest in training, and you need to invest in understanding the efficiency of your office. You need to invest in understanding systems and structure and delegation and all those things that we talk about, that are a massive part, of running a successful business.
So then, so I'm just going to recap those four. Marketing is usually the biggest one. How do we get more people in through the door? Care protocols. Are we offering our patients enough? Do we have enough wellness plans, niche plans, whatever they may be? Team, is our team at the optimum level they need to be at? Do we need more team members in order to increase capacity? And then capital expenditure, whether that's location or equipment in the office. What do I need to do in order to expand my capacity to service and to care for my patients? So those are pretty much the four. Of course, there can be some on the outline, but 95% of all scaling and all growing plans are going to encompass 1, 2, 3, or 4 of those things in some iteration or form. We then need to identify, so now we know what we need to invest in. So we've sat down and we've gone, okay, these are the things we need to do. We need to do this, this, and this. This is what's going to make the difference. We now need to then identify, well, how much do we need? What is our actual need here in these different areas? So that can be financial. By and large, it is financial, but it can also be time, effort, and energy. So on the last webinar, Dr. Josiah was talking about the 7 marketing strategies. And one of the first things he said in that webinar was you need to identify what is your capacity here. Do you have money that you can invest into marketing, or do you have time that you can invest into marketing? Because that's going to then start to decide what is the best path to take. And it's the exact same understanding here. You got to say, okay, I know what I need to do. Now, is this a financial or a time, effort, and energy investment? Sometimes it's a bit of both, but where we do see a lot of problems is people are going immediately to financial. Oh, I have to run more ads. Oh, I have to hire more people. And Dr. Josiah was just talking about it, when actually, no, maybe you just got to communicate how you can care for your patients better. Maybe you can just manage your team better. That's time, effort, and energy. That's not money, but you can still get a good outcome. So you got to identify that. And then the third is then looking at how long is this going to take? And this is by far and away the hardest part, is because how long is a piece of string? How long is something going to take is very hard to forecast and very hard to anticipate. And so, but if we don't know how long it's going to take, we cannot plan for how long this growth period is going to be. And then do we have enough resources to survive that growth period? Are we going to be under too much stress if it takes longer? What happens if we said it was going to take 3 months and it took 6? What happens if you said we're going to hire an associate and they turn out to be a muppet, and then you have to hire a new associate? So now this 3-month plan turned into 6-month plan. Okay, we invest all this money into Facebook. Facebook changes the algorithm. All of a sudden, everything takes longer. Got a new marketing company. Oh, they're great for the first 30 days. Then they weren't so good. Now we're going to go find a new marketing company. Nothing I'm telling you is something you probably haven't experienced. It's the time frame from going from A to B. You may be able to know what to do, how much to take, but what you so often cannot manage is the time frame. And the problem with that is this. This is the problem with time. Is time costs you money. Time is cash in your business. The longer things take, the more cash you're going to need to keep it going. And we all experienced this when COVID hit. All of a sudden, we didn't know how long it was going to be, and it went dragged on and on and on, and it just cost people so much cash. It was frightening, especially in an industry like the chiropractic industry or the healthcare industry. Cash and time play this horrible game together, that if we forecast time incorrectly, we pay the price in cash. The joy is we get the converse effect as well, but I'll talk about that in a minute. And so I'm going to go back to this graph to illustrate this cash piece again punch it in your face, excuse the analogy, but I want you to get this, okay? When you can achieve this type of outcome, so this is a 30% profit margin, we've gone to 50, we've gone to 100, we're going. We've gone through our growth cycles, no matter how steep they were, no matter how down and up they were, that's irrelevant, but we've achieved them. We've achieved our outcomes. We've now averaged, maybe not quite averaged 30%, maybe we're averaging a 26% profit margin here, but that graph is infinitely better than that graph. Okay, on this graph, every month, we are accumulating healthy levels of cash flow. If we weren't forecasting correctly, so if I go back to the first ever slide I told you and said, let's just get to 50,000 without any profitability targets, and you only got to 15% at a time, you've accumulated half the amount of cash under this model than you would have under this model. And so, and they get even worse than this. Some of them are 5%, some of them are -%. And some people have experienced on this call. I know you've experienced that, where we've gone for 6 months and we've actually accumulated no cash whatsoever. We've actually just spent a whole bunch of them. Okay. And that's why I go back to the perfect P&L and say, you have to be aiming for these targets, because if you don't, and you're just aiming for revenue and you fall prey to scaling, to growing to the next step too early, I'm going to grow from 50 to 100, but I'm actually here, not here, I'm here. You may feel great. Hey guys, look at my P&L statement. I got $100,000 on the top line. This is amazing. All those vanity metrics are amazing, but at some point it's going to come bite you, because we have a massive reduced cash flow, like reduction in cash flow, which is a massive problem. And I'm going to explain to you why that's a problem now. And that's what's going to ultimately put pressure on our business. And that's why I go back and say, perfect P&L, make sure we hit those targets. What happens when we do this, like what happens when we're in this phase, is we have such low levels of cash flow that any growth plan that we put in place is going to start to be diminished by the cash availability that we have. So we can do step one and we can say, what do we need to do? We've identified it. We need to go hire an associate. Okay. Step two is, how much are we going to need? It's going to cost us X amount of money. Then we're going to get to step three and say, but unfortunately, instead of having the cash on hand we should have, the cash flow we should have, we don't. Now, all of a sudden, making that decision is infinitely harder. Not only is it harder to actually make the decision, you run the risk of not giving that decision enough time to succeed. How many of you have gone into a marketing campaign and in the first 90 days, you've been as frustrated as anything because it's not giving you the return you expected? That's pretty normal. You're not just going to put money in and get money out. Some of these things take time. But if you start the growth cycle process already on low cash flow, you're giving yourself no opportunity for this thing to truly be successful. It's like jumping off a diving board that doesn't bounce. It doesn't move. So use that analogy. The Olympics is going on. Someone rocks up on the diving board and they jump and the thing just stands rock still because there's no give. There's no space. There's nothing there. It's not going to work out well. This creates that space. This gives you all of this ability, this capacity to build up cash flow, extend our runway. Okay, it may not work out perfectly. This thing can flatline for a much longer period of time now before it becomes a problem. On this model, no, we can't flatline for too long because we're going to start running out of money. So that's why it's so fundamentally important to make sure that we understand that in these growth cycles, we're getting to those points, because time and cash are going to kill us. So what I want to talk to you about now is cash on hand. Okay, so you understood what I'm saying. Okay, that's great. We're not quite cash on hand yet, more just the power of cash flow. So you understood. We've identified the thing. We've identified how much it's going to cost, and we now try to identify the amount of time. But now, because time and cash is so interlinked, we need to understand what is the power of cash. What does cash actually do for us? So the first thing I want to talk to you about is where my analogy of a car and my analogy of running a race, like a marathon or a sprint, falls short in the entrepreneurial world or in the business world, is that those two things, my car and me as a human, it's harder for me to, while I'm exerting so much energy, or while my car is exerting energy, to produce its own energy. The car has to stop and refuel. You have to stop and sleep and eat. The joy of a business is running a highly effective business feeds itself. It's called free cash flow. As you are running a profitable business, you are generating the very resources you need to continue running your business and go even faster and faster and faster and faster. You don't need to stop. You don't need to push pause and sleep. You don't need to push pause and fill up at the gas station. Your business is doing that itself as you go. And that is the power of free cash flow. Free cash flow is all about profitability. If we can be profitable, generate that cash flow, we are going to continue to give ourselves the ability to, whenever we want to put our foot on the gas and grow, we're not going to worry about the fuel tank being too full or not, because we've run so well that we've generated the cash flow levels. If we didn't run so well and we were at 15% or less, as soon as we go to our gas pedal, we're going to get this bing, 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 no fuel in the tank. Bing, 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 no fuel in the tank. You're like, oh, shit, like I really want to go faster, but now I've got unnecessary pressure because I don't have any money. I don't have the resources I need in order to get to where I want to get to.
Yeah, and hey, let me make sure I interject on this, because once you start making cash, what you should not do is to go buy a sports car and Rolex and a boat and invest in whatever, Bitcoin or you name it. You need to invest back into yourself and your business first and foremost. So this is something I harp on doctors all the time. They're like, how do I want to have real estate. I want to do this. You do all this, this, and this. Like, I never once even dreamed about doing any of those things until I couldn't figure out how to invest more in myself, and I couldn't figure out how to grow my business fast enough. And then at that point, the money was just piling up in my bank account faster than I knew what to do with it. Okay. When you have that problem, when the money is piling up in your bank account faster than you know what to do with it, okay, then you can go buy your whatever random, Louis Vuitton fun stuff that you want to do and go for it. But not until that point. You need to say, what do I need to know? What do I need to learn? How can I invest? What do I need to learn, read, educate? What conferences, events, activities do I need to be involved with in the profession and outside the profession? I got to $1 million, $2 million strictly, utilizing knowledge I'd had from groups in the profession. The way I went from 2 to 5 million is I started looking outside of our profession to scale. What are businesses far bigger than chiropractors doing to grow and scale their business to get to new levels, right? And that's when I went to the next level. But I invested, like I said, in myself. I invested in my own personal and professional development first and foremost. Then, I invested as much as I possibly could back into my business, because you're always gonna have the best ROI on investing back into your business. And if you want to get to cruise control, like we talked about, if you want to put highway miles on, you don't want to be burned out, going from red light to stop sign, to red light and hitting all these different bottlenecks and plateaus within your clinic, then you need to invest in the vehicle that's going to take you there first and foremost. Then and only then you start looking into other things. So, everyone wants to get cash flow, everyone wants to get this money in your bank, but then you need to utilize that money properly to set yourself up for long-term success. Don't get distracted by, shiny object syndrome.
Good point. I won't reiterate it more. So what I was talking about is like the power of a business is it's self-generating. Free cash flow generates itself. You don't need to stop, don't need to rest. Like most things in the world, pretty much like everything, wherever there's a positive, there's usually an equal and opposite negative. Okay. And so the other side of that coin is that if you don't get this right, if you're not a self-feeding business, i.e. positive cash flow, you can be a cash consuming business, which means you're now in the cycle where you're just consuming cash at a rate that is unsustainable. And what you're doing is you're piling up huge levels of debt and impacting future growth to the point where it's almost impossible. And that's a horrible thing to do. So we want to be mindful of that. There's that equal and opposite effect of not, being a free cash flow type business, which every chiropractor should be. There's no question in my mind that everyone in this industry, medical providers, everyone should be in that phase. We're not in the SaaS startup phase where you can just churn through cash for 6 years and everyone still loves you. That's not the business model. Okay. Then the last thing about the power of cash flow is it's our ultimate protection mechanism. It's our ultimate shield that we need to weather the storm. When things get hard, when things start to change, whether it's the economy, whether it's the environment, whatever it may be, when those things start to become harder to control, Facebook ads, trying to hire humans. Like, yes, we can love our team as much as they want. They're human beings. They're going to go through things. They're going to experience things. They're going to go through ups and downs of how they perform. Some people are going to leave. Some people aren't going to perform. Like, these things happen. Cash is our ultimate protection mechanism. You know, how many people have you heard of talking about a war chest? Like, do you have the war chest you need in order to survive the storm? And that's what it is. Cash is a massive protection mechanism to helping you ensure that you can weather the storm. So what I want to talk about next is a little bit of cash on hand. Okay. So when we think about cash on hand, again, you get in a report that we send you every single month, there's a section that says cash on hand. Why? The top few sections, all about the perfect P&L. Why? Because they're so fundamentally important. I'm not going to stop talking about it because it's so fundamentally important, not just about immediate short-term, how am I doing right now, but in terms of the bigger picture. If you haven't got that from the last 40 minutes, then I don't know how else you'll ever get it. But then the cash on hand is understanding, do we have the resource base that we need? So what is the right resource base? In this industry, 1.5 months or 1.5 months of cash on hand is more than adequate. We're not a high capital investment industry. We don't need high volumes of cash flow to go buy stock that's going to sit on a shelf for 6 months and then we're going to sell it. We're not, manufacturing something, so we need to buy everything and then only sell it in 6 months' time. Those are very cash dependent businesses that need to manage their cash flow very differently. In this industry, you literally just need to make sure that you can cover the basic costs of running your practice for a period of time. And so 1.5 months is great. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we want to do is measure what is the average expense rate we have in our business. So you can look at the last 3 months of your business. What we do in our reports is we take your average expenses year to date. Let's say it's $45,000 a month. Multiply that by 1.5. There's your cash on hand level. Okay, whatever that number is, I should never use this 45 to then divide it by 2 to get a decimal of 0.5, but I did. So whatever that number is becomes your cash on hand level. So ideally, that's optimum. We want you to have that much cash on hand, 60 odd, whatever it may be, doesn't matter. Okay, that's how much cash you want. The way we measure cash on hand is saying cash in the bank. So taking all your bank accounts, so actual bank accounts, checking accounts, and savings accounts, taking that cash, and we take out credit card balances. So we take out short-term debt. So if you had $50,000 in your bank account and you owed $15,000 on your credit card, we would say you have a net cash flow of $35,000. Okay. We don't take into account long-term debt. I don't want to get into the accounting science of all of this stuff. We'll be here for way too long. But short-term debt is a great way to understand what is your actual cash on hand at any point in time. So we take bank balances, less short-term credit card debt, and then we have that number. And then we're going to give you a rating on your report. We give you the rating. Are you above that? Are you below that? Or are you above that? Is that good or bad? We've often said to people, hey, you have way too much money in your bank. Like, go take it out of your business. Go, invest that. Go diversify that money. Go invest it elsewhere. Exactly what Dr. Josiah just said. Obviously, if you're below that, it's like, hey, we need to think about the perfect P&L. We need to think about profitability. We need to focus more on efficiency in order to accumulate our cash on hand. A couple of things that people don't think about when they're thinking about cash are some sinkholes. So the cash sinkholes, the 3 biggest cash sinkholes are owners' distributions. Remember, if you're running a profit and loss statement, your W-2 salaries are going to go in there. So let's say you're paying yourself $80,000 a year W-2 salary goes in. But you're giving yourself another $5,000 a month in a distribution. So another $60,000 a year over that is in a distribution. That forms part of your balance sheet. Again, I'm not getting into accounting science. That goes into your balance sheet. So we often lose sight of it. We often don't see that money, we don't see it on our profit and loss statement, so we kind of lose track of it. And that's a huge drawdown on cash. The same thing with taxes. Whenever we pay taxes, comes out of our bank account. That's not great. And then personal expenses. So any personal expenses you're running through the business usually have a massive draw on our cash on hand. And you can almost guarantee to every single one of you have asked this question before. Hey, I know I'm profitable, but my bank account hasn't changed in the last month. It started on this balance and it ended on this balance. And when you go back and you go look at your balance sheet, you see, oh, you took a draw. Oh, you paid out, some of the debt that you have. Oh, you had all these personal expenses. And then you realize that's where all my cash went. Okay, so those are cash sinkholes that we need to be mindful of to ensure that we manage them correctly, so we don't think we're doing well, hey, we're producing great profit, but actually our cash isn't moving anymore. Okay, and then also planning for foreseeable events. If you do not plan for a foreseeable event, then unforeseeable events are going to hit you all over the place because everything's unforeseeable for you then. So what are some of the major foreseeable events? Fixed monthly debt repayments, so paying purchase of your office, the equipment in your office, student loans, whatever it is. Those are, about them. They are foreseeable. They're there. Make sure you're planning for them accordingly. Quarterly tax payments, we always recommend to people, not that we're tax people, but just you can use the safe harbor. You can know exactly how much your quarterly estimate should be before the year even starts. So it's actually foreseeable. If you get a message from your CPA and you're frustrated that they told you one day before it was paid that you have to pay your quarterly taxes, yes, I would be frustrated with my CPA, but to be brutally honest with you, that's a foreseeable event. And if you didn't know it's a foreseeable event, now you do know it's a foreseeable event. You're going to pay quarterly taxes every single quarter, and you can work out the amount pretty easy. Talk to your CPA, make sure you know those. And then any salary movement. So often in contracts, there's an agreement of a salary increase, or there's maybe a bonus structure, making sure that we understand when those things kick in, when those bonuses are due. We again don't want to be, after the fact, surprised that all of a sudden there's now money we need to pay for something that we could have foreseen. Okay. So the last thing I want to show you on cash on hand is this thing here is a very typical cash on hand graph. It's pretty helpful to conceptualize because it is always a wavy graph. Cash is always up and down, and it's very normal. So in a normal business, obviously it's going to be different in every business, but I'll just give you a normal business. And this is your 1.5 level. Okay, so this level here is the 1.5 times expenses. We usually start the year below that. Why? Because we just ended the year, and we normally end the year pretty high, but we then take some big distributions out to pay the owner, maybe bonuses for our team. There's usually massive tax payments that become due, whether it's Q4 or looking to actually settle any outstanding taxes, all kind of happening in and around that Q4 to Q1 phase. So we usually start pretty low. But if you're running a good business, you will accumulate cash over time. You'll then get your first quarterly tax payment and you may have a dip. It may not be a quarterly tax payment, it may be a quarterly bonus distribution. It could be any of those things, okay? And then we accumulate cash again, and we take another dip on Q2 and then Q3. And what we find is if you average out this graph, you should be averaging out around 1.5. But you're never just going to sit at 1.5 like a flat line, because this is very natural and normal. So I don't want you to feel discouraged in the fact that you may have a wavy effect in your cash flow cycle. On everyone's report, right at the bottom, there is a graph, or second from the bottom thing, there's a graph that has exactly this. It tracks cash flow. Why do we do that? Because when we look at trends, we want to see, is that a normal cash flow graph, or is there an abnormality to it? Is there being a high up or a high down? We want to understand that, because that's going to make a difference to how we analyze the performance of your practice. Okay, so cash on hand, 1.5 months. Think about those sinkholes, plan for the inevitable because it's going to happen, and understand that this is what a cash flow graph can look like. Okay, so the last thing I want to share with you is resource allocation. Okay, so the last thing is, now we've identified all these things. We've understood how to plan for this. We know that there's going to be a growth cycle. We understand the perfect P&L. We understand the power of cash on hand. Now we've got to the point where we say, okay, now we need to start allocating resources to this growth plan. How do we do that? Okay, so the first, a little bit of repetitive, but make sure we cover all the points, is a very clearly defined plan. We've got to define where are we going, not $50,000 a month to $100,000 a month, $50,000 a month at X profit margin to $100,000 a month at X profit margin. That's a more clearly defined plan, because now we have both income and profitability, which is obviously way better for us to forecast around. We need to understand that growth is not linear. There's going to be a wavy effect, and that's normal. And we want to look long term, okay? And that analogy of most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, but underestimate what they can do in 10 years. We're all humans. It's pretty normal. So we think, oh, I'm going to grow. I'm just going to grow and scale my business. It's going to take me 2-3 months. Usually it takes a little bit longer. Are we planning for that? Are we aware of that? Okay, so we've got to clearly define these things and understand all those needs. Okay, we have got to also be able to adapt. So the second point is to changing metrics. One of the biggest fallacies is that what works at small works at big. So I went to a screening and I got 10 new people to come in to do a day one, and I converted 7 of them. And so you sit back and say, I would like to have 70 new patients. So I need to do 10 screenings to get 7 new day ones to get 100 new day ones to convert 70% of them to get 70 new patients. Like, just because it worked at one doesn't mean it's going to work at scale. Usually things at scale have diminishing returns. The more money you spend on Facebook marketing, the lower your return is going to be. That's the way the world works. And so we've got to understand that just because it works in one iteration, you can't just go, hey, times that by 10, I get my outcome. Oh, I did it 3 times. If I just did it 100 times, it's going to work. We've got to understand that the metrics change. How do you know that? You can just go look at the perfect P&L framework. Making $50,000 a month may get you a 40% profit margin. Making $500,000 a month may only get you a 20% profit margin. The metrics change. It's normal. It's natural. Plan for it. Don't let it be an unexpected thing that happens to you. Okay. Then the last 2 are the most important. First one is you have to we've touched on it already, but I'm going to reiterate it. You have to maximize current resources. The worst thing you can do in a growth plan or in a growth phase is to start adding additional resources when your current resources are not at capacity. Because now you are creating unnecessary pressure and stress on your business because you've got underperforming resources and now you're trying to bring more resources to the table. So we have to optimize the existing resources we have. We have to make sure that our marketing is working well. We're at capacity. We've filled up our schedules. Our people are working the way we want. We've got to maximize everything. If I do a strategic planning call with a client, and many of you have been on one before, we build the first capacity model, which mimics the current. The first question I always ask is, okay, don't hire another person. Don't do anything else. How much more revenue can you make? How many more patients can you see? Because that is all about maximizing current resources. Yes, you may need to spend more money on marketing, but we want to maximize all of our resources. And then obviously effective management. Yes, if you feel like we're not maximizing resources, we've got to look at management. Could we manage our resources better so we can get more out of them? Okay, just Dr. Josiah has spoken about that as well. And then the last one is now we're going to say, okay, we're going to actually physically go out and invest into new resources. So we're going to go and put another $5,000 into a marketing campaign. We are going to now go and employ a new person or an associate or whatever that may be. Strongly encourage you to follow the theory of constraints. The way the theory of constraints works is you've got to rank priority of what's the most important, what's holding you back, what's stopping you, and spend the majority of your time on the top one. So instead of spending 20% of your time on the top 5, spend 95% of your time on the top 1. Get that one taken care of, and then move to the next, and move to the next, and move to the next. You're going to move a lot faster. So if you apply that same methodology to this, the first thing you want to do is avoid overwhelm. So you want overloading. So you're saying, okay, I'm going to move to a new location. I'm going to get a new marketing company, and I'm going to hire an associate all at once. You've got now 3 massive variables that require significant investment of money and time, effort, and energy. New location, new marketing company, and you want them all to work at the same time in order to hit your goals. That is overstretching. That is placing unnecessary pressure on a system that maybe doesn't need to be placed on. Let's rather boil it down to one. What's the one that's going to be the biggest impact? Let's go 90% into that one, get that one right, invest the time, effort, and energy. We'll shorten the time frame. When we shorten the time frame, we extend the amount of cash we have on hand at the end of the time frame. When we extend the time frame, now we're going to do 3 major things. Time frame gets extended, cash flow pressure leads to failure. So we want to try shorten time frames. If we want to do something, we want to do it as quickly as we possibly can. If you want to sprint, back to the analogy, you don't want to sprint for 5 miles. You want to sprint for 200 meters. Okay? You don't want to sprint for 5 miles. But if you're going to do 3 things, you're going to try and make yourself sprint for 5 miles. It's going to be really hard. Okay. And so then it's all about prioritizing impact. Like you got to identify of those things, what is going to have the biggest impact? What of these things is going to actually move the needle the furthest? That becomes the primary focus. That's where I'm going to put all my time, effort, and energy in. I can put those extra resources in, shorten that time frame massively, keep as much cash on hand as you can, get through that growth phase, get back to profitability, and then we start again and again and again. And the most important thing is this is normal. That wavy thing is normal. It's not an abnormal graph. It's a very normal graph. It's going to happen to you. Don't be surprised when it happens. Embrace it. Use it to your advantage. And if you can follow these few things, not only are you going to understand how to plan effectively for growth, understand the power of cash flow, but also get your resource allocation to the point it needs to be, so that when you now go through this growth phase, hopefully you are infinitely more equipped to make it successful.
Awesome information, Adam. I really love the whole car analogy. I mean, just so true with so many ways throughout the entire thought process. If you're low on gas, then you're puttering, you feel like you got to slow down. You can't rev the engine. You can't get to the next level. You're barely limping to the gas station. You can't grow. You can't get to the next level. You can't go on the highway. You can't get into cruise mode because you're always just trying to find the next gas station. You're getting burned out. You're stopping, you're starting, you're not getting to the right level. Right. And so oftentimes doctors have a great month and then they just go back down to where they were because they didn't understand what made the best month. How can you make the best month your every month? Right. And, the main principles that you talked about, with strategic growth planning, really understanding where are you going, how are you going to get there, and then what's it going to take to get there. Understanding that it's not linear, I think, is a huge revelation for so many doctors, because they oftentimes are trying to grow to the next level and they're like, hey, wait a second, why is my profit not growing in proportion to my income? And they think, well, maybe I shouldn't grow, maybe I should stop because this is harder. But they need to realize it's a bottleneck, it's a temporary plateau, that if they could blow past that, then they could get to a far greater level than they ever could have, right? And the power of cash, being able to have the ability to invest in your own business, but I think even more, the clarity within your own mind. When you have the freedom, with cash in the bank, then you're going to maybe take a little bit more of a risk. You're going to maybe go a little bit more out there and you're going to do those things that are necessary to grow and scale. But if you're always in protective mode, if you're always in risk mitigation and you're always in defensive mode, you can't be in defense and growth at the same time, right? We all know chiropractors, parasympathetic, sympathetic, it's one or the other, right? And we need to be able to put our foot on the gas when necessary and understand the numbers behind it so that we feel confident to be able to do that. And I think that's a big thing. Doctors just don't understand the framework of the numbers. And can I spend more on this? Can I invest in this? Should I reallocate my resources to this, right? And then understand the capacity of all your different resources, whether it be your office, your clinic, your LTV, all the different factors that are managing and going down into the nitty gritty, of scaling your revenue, and your profit. I think you hit it at the end there, is you can't have 5 priorities, right? You need to have one focus. What is that top bottleneck that if you focused on today, this month is going to have the single largest impact on maximizing revenue and profitability? And honestly, that is the entire premise of Lucro. Come up with a whole game plan. Where you are, where do you want to be, how are you going to get there? Here's your monthly reports. Here's what you need to do to get to the next level. Here's the best action step that you need to focus on, in the next 30 days to get to that level, right? Because if you're like me or most doctors that I know, it's like getting into these nitty gritties and understanding it. I just want someone to say, hey, go in this direction at this speed and do this. And that's going to be the easiest, thing to do. That's why, every level of sports, you have a leader, you have a coach that dictates and directs. And that's really what we want to be, like I said, is your financial coach, your compass of where to go, how to get there, your GPS. You got to take the steps, you got to take the action, but we're going to give you the blueprint, the steps, and exactly what to do, how to get there, and understand the framework, behind why you need to do these things, as well. So thank you, everybody, for hopping on today's masterclass. And I really hope we provided lots of value about growth cycles and how you can supercharge your practice with expert cash flow management.